At the time when Putin rose, I mean, you had George Bush saying, I looked into his eyes and the man had soul, and you had very many people in Europe saying that you could do business with him. We were reasonably confident in India, Bill, that Mr. Putin is very much in the Stalin tradition. Now, that does not mean that you cannot have an accommodation with the West. Stalin had a very strong partnership with the West. He had a very strong partnership with Britain and the US against Germany. But the day Hitler was defeated, the day Tojo was defeated in Japan, that was the end of the partnership. Yeah, whether it was in Korea, whether it was in Eastern Europe, I mean, you know, Stalin made it very clear, well, boys, your use is over, now we're enemies again. And they became, and he was very clear on that. In my view, in a much more, if I may say so, you know, more PR, less direct, less open, less transparent than Joseph Stalin was, Putin is very much in that mold. Now, what's the significance of that? Let's go back now to China. China, you had Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong, of course, I mean, you know, I mean, there are a lot of people who regard him as a terror, like they regard Stalin. But the reality is, if you look at India, for example, in 1947, when India became free, and you go back just 1 year before to British India, we are supposed to be the inheritors of British India. British India had Myanmar, it had Sri Lanka, it had Pakistan, it had Bangladesh, it had suzerainty over Nepal, it had significant suzerainty over Afghanistan. That was British India. It had a huge amount of suzerainty over the Middle East. In 1947, all these things separated and they became different countries. Even the core of India was split up into India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Sri Lanka went away, Nepal went away. Look at China on the other hand. Myanmar went away. Myanmar was very much part of British India. Look at China. Xinjiang was never really a part of China. Tibet was never really a Han kingdom. I mean, the Tibetans have their own unique culture, they have their own unique society, or they had. Now I think it's 60% Han, and in the next 25 years it's going to be 80% Han. And I think you're going to be looking to India and to the US if you want to find Tibetan culture. You're not going to find it in Tibet. But the fact is, Tibet, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, Manchuria, all these states that in fact was not really part of the Middle Kingdom, became part of the Middle Kingdom. They were forcibly incorporated by Mao Zedong into the Middle Kingdom, with the only one little remnant remaining, and that was Taiwan. And frankly, I think Mao did not pay much attention to it because he thought it was too insignificant, really, for him to bother about. And anyway, you had Chiang Kai-shek there. And Mao had a very interesting love-hate relationship with Chiang Kai-shek. I mean, he loved the guy, he hated the guy. So like Hitler is supposed to have said that I'm not going to invade Britain because he had a love-hate relationship with Britain. You know, he went ahead with his Battle of Britain, but he never really had a serious plan of invading because he always thought Britain will have its empire and I'll have my empire in Europe, and the two of us will live happily together. In the case of Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong, Mao had that kind of feeling, in my view, for Chiang Kai-shek. Whatever it is, they left Taiwan alone. But the whole country was widened, enlarged, and made into a huge continental power, the equal of the United States in terms of continental size. I mean, I'm not, good at statistics, but I think it may be a little bit bigger than the continental United States. I mean, United States, China, the People's Republic. I'm not sure. It could be a little, if you look at Alaska, maybe it's more. But what I'm saying is, that is the difference between the Chinese leadership and the Indian leadership. The Indian leadership was ready with second best, third best, fourth best, 10th best, 12th best. The Chinese leadership was not ready with anything except exactly what they wanted, which is a unified kingdom, which is bigger than any Han kingdom ever in the past. Today's People's Republic of China, if you go back to Indian history, you'll talk about the Vijayanagar Empire, in which Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia were part of the Vijayanagar Empire. You have the Mughal Empire, which stretched past Afghanistan to some parts of Persia, to some parts of Central Asia. Those were the maximum spreads of the Indian empire, so to speak, of any capital based in what is today's India, controlling territories in a legal way. China has become the biggest Chinese empire in history is now, and that is the Chinese state. Now, you had Deng Xiaoping. And Deng Xiaoping was, in a sense, in one sense, he was in the same mold as, let us say, Gorbachev or Yeltsin or whatever, in that he was very clear, you needed an accommodation with the West. You cannot challenge the West. You cannot confront the West. You need to work with the West. So when Deng came to power in China, about 77, 78, I think, and he established himself about 81, 82, 83. From that time onwards, of course, Mao Zedong had that reaching out to Nixon, but in my personal view, that reaching out to Nixon was a very tactical move. It was not a strategic move for a long-term relationship of friendship and alliance with the United States. It was a very tactical move based on his problems with the USSR and the need to get a shot. It's like Stalin reaching out to President Roosevelt and Winston Churchill. Mao Zedong reached out to Nixon. I think the Americans on the whole were a lot more sentimental about it and were a lot more generous about Mao's reasons for this kind of thing. And they saw a very strong strategic relationship where actually it was, from the beginning itself, only a